Recording in progress.
Good evening, all. A very warm welcome to the 7th edition of the Indian Photo Festival, India's longest running international photography festival. Today, we have here with us Arati Kumar Rao. She's a National Geographic explorer, an independent environment photographer. She's a writer and an artist documenting the slow violence of ecological degradation. Arati is currently based in the Western Ghats, right, Arati?
Yes, I am.
And she chronicles the effect of South Asia's changing landscapes and climate on livelihoods and biodiversity. Such fantastic work, Arati. She communicates through photos, long-form narratives, and art, and she's working on her first book. She's currently on a National Geographic Explorer grant to document forced human migration due to ecological degradation. Arati, we cannot wait for you to take us forward with your work and your journey. I understand that the format of this talk is going to be a little different. Please run us through it, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Jyoti. Thanks, Indian Photo Fest, for having me. Thanks to the whole team that organized this. It's been a wonderful few days, and I've been logged in. Thank you all for all of you who have joined in as well. I hope you'll have fun. I wanted to keep this slightly more interactive. I don't want to be droning on and on for the whole hour. So I'll take you through a little bit, and then I elicited questions from our online community earlier this week, and I got some interesting ones in. So I will be answering those, but I would love for all of you who are logged in to chime in as well. Ask me anything about storytelling and about my work, or about the state of the world that we are in, anything at all. And I hope to be able to answer it. So let's keep this interactive, and I'll start with a short introduction to what it is that I do. I am hoping that you guys can see my screen.
Yes.
Great, super. And so some stories are slow burn. They unfold over generations. They do not come high in spectacle. They manifest across geographies. They're not explosive. They don't have blood and gore. They're not eventful. And that is what Rob Nixon calls a slow violence. The catastrophic acts, they're very, very painful, but they're slow and instant spectacle, which means that they're imperceptible almost as they unfold, but they're very high in long-term effects. And much of environmental degradation is like this, is a slow violence. And so it's something that it behooves us to pay attention to, very close attention to, because it kind of semaphores what is to come. Let's start. I want to take you down a river. Why a river? A river is our lifeblood. It's the vein. It's what keeps millions and millions of people alive today, especially in a subcontinent like ours. And it's also something that everybody wants a piece of. So we need rivers for drinking water. We need rivers for agriculture. We need it for industry. We need it for everything. Biodiversity needs it. All the animals need it. So, river is a river, and fresh water is something that we all need to subsist and sustain. So I thought, let's start with a journey down my favorite river, which is the Siang/Brahmaputra. Ready? Okay, so basically what happens is that this river starts in Tibet and finds its home in the Bay of Bengal. And so that's the journey that we're going to be taking today. Somewhere behind these mountains, to the northwest of this Himalayan range that you see over here, hangs the tongue of a glacier called Angsi. And from that glacier comes forth a little trickle. And that trickle then swells by adding more trickles to it and starts flowing blue, placid across the plains, the plateau of Tibet. It flows east, and so it crosses the low mountains on the plateau and the beautiful old forbidden city of Lhasa. It flows south of Lhasa, and it keeps flowing east until it reaches eastern Tibet. And here it does a very interesting thing. There are two really tall peaks called the Namche Barwa and the Gyalaperi. And this river does an about turn. It turns in on itself, it bends, and then it flows south, dropping a whopping 6,500 meters to enter India. This region, from when it does the turn between Namche Barwa and Gyalaperi and before it and when it enters India, is a very sacred place. It's a sacred place for Buddhists, and it's called the Hidden Land. It's the land that Guru Padmasambhava said will be revealed to Buddhists when they are persecuted and they're running from persecution and they need shelter. And this hidden land called Pemaka it lies between China and India, and the southern part of it is in India. This photograph is from there. It's in Arunachal. And when this river, the great river, which started in Tibet and flowed in Tibet as the Yarlung Tsangpo, which is the great river, turned and came into India, it took on the name Siang. And here it flows through Pemako, this very, very sacred place, which is thick with forests, and it is the land of the Khamba Buddhists. And these guys came from Tibet. They were persecuted, and they came from their warrior clan. They're a Buddhist warrior clan, and they settled here, just a few thousand people, so it's not very populated. And the river then flows down into Adi land, from Buddhist land into Adi land. The Adi are a very fierce tribe, a powerful, a very proud tribe. And this was the tribe that held the British at bay. And they're very, very proud of what they did, that they could hold a superior, a people with much more weapons and superior ammunition. And the British could not penetrate this region in the early 1900s. And the Adi beat back 3 Abor expeditions. So this Siang actually is an Adi, is a contraction of 2 Adi words. Asi means water, and Upper Ang means heart. So Siang means the river that flows through our heart. And this river flows through the heart of the Adi land. And you'll see it's thick with forests, steep slopes where there's June cultivation, which is shifting cultivation, and ancient ferns, tree ferns, which predate dinosaurs going back 320 million years ago. And these people inhabit this region still, very sparsely populated, tiny hamlets, beautiful country, but things are changing. And why? Because China, on its side, has planned dams on the Yarlung Tsangpo, and to counter that, India is planning dams on the Siang, which would threaten a whole swath of this whole region. The Siang passes through Adi lands, and then it comes out into Assam, where it is joined by 2 other big rivers, the Dibang and the Lohit, to become the mighty Brahmaputra. The Brahmaputra flows through the plains of Assam, and it is so mighty. In the monsoon, you cannot see the shore. It's 18 kilometers wide. It's breathtaking and awe-inspiring and a little intimidating as well. It floods every monsoon, and this is an essential flood because it brings down very, very important silt from the Himalayas, and it spreads it over the floodplains. And this silt is extremely important for the crops. Baudhan, the red rice of Assam, it needs this kind of silt to grow, and it's a very, very special crop. So the floods that come every year that we hear about are important, and it is important for the economy of that state and for the food bowl. It replenishes the food bowl. It also replenishes the fish populations. It reconnects the wetlands. It does a whole lot of things. So floods are really important. And there's a very interesting article written by Amitangshu Acharya, which any of you, if you're interested, you can hit me up and I'll show you. And it talks about why floods are important in Assam. So the mainstay of Assam, there's a lot of fishing, local fishing in wetlands, using old bamboo architecture. But things are again changing. And the floods are not what they used to be. What used to be fine silt that used to be carried down by the rivers due to rampant deforestation in Arunachal, which has lost forests to the area of the size of Goa in 18 years, 3,200 square kilometers of forest gone. And this rampant road cutting and mining, sand mining, as well as river rock mining, which is dislodging a whole lot of sand. So now what's coming down with the river is not silt, which is fine, but thick and heavy sand. And that comes and washes off all the paddy and sits on the paddy and makes all those fields inert for over a decade. And that's really hard. And then those kinds of floods also then breach embankments, which are not being, there's no upkeep of the embankments, so they're old and they're frail, and then they breach, and then there's floods because there are people living behind those embankments, and then there's devastation. So this is more man-made. It is not, we aren't even talking climate change here. We're just talking about how we have altered the landscape in Arunachal, which then affects downstream Assam. Okay, So the Brahmaputra flows through Assam, and then it makes another turn. It takes a left turn and goes into Bangladesh. Now, why I'm talking about Brahmaputra is also because it flows through 3 countries. It comes from China, it comes into India, and then it goes into Bangladesh. And these 3 countries are heavily populated, high energy consuming countries, and not very not very friendly when it comes to water sharing, excuse me. And so China is upstream, India is midstream, and Bangladesh is downstream, right? It's a lower riparian country. So this Brahmaputra, when it turns and goes into Bangladesh, India plays God. So where China built dams on the interface between China and India, India builds dams on the interface between India and Bangladesh. So the Brahmaputra here is joined by its one of its biggest tributaries, the Teesta, on which there's a huge dam just before entering Bangladesh. And then Bangladesh has its own needs, and it puts in its own dam just after. And what ends up happening, this is where we're talking about the last sea that you're seeing where it enters Bangladesh. What ends up happening is that it cuts out a whole lot of people because every dam holds back water, diverts water, and holds back silt. And what ends up happening is that the people living downstream have no water. We can actually walk across the Teesta in the dry season, which used to never be possible in Bangladesh. And no water, no fish. So the fishermen, a large part of the people who live along the Teesta are fishermen, and they have no fish to catch. And this throws millions of people into this cycle of menial labor, daily wages, and that throws them at the mercy of market forces. So that is again something that is changing. Again, what we are doing to the river is changing how it's affecting the whole population. So the Brahmaputra flows through the press of humanity of Bangladesh. It is joined by the Ganga, which is called Podha in Bangladesh, and then it comes to its delta. It comes home to meet the Bay of Bengal. And this delta is the largest unbroken mangrove forest in the world, highly biodiverse, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and very precious. It's the first line of defense against storm surges, against rising sea levels, against everything. But it's also a margin land. It's on the cusp of the salt water of the Bay of Bengal and the sweet water of the rivers. And that margin land is always extremely biodiverse. And so that's also the home of Hilsa. And it's the land of 18 tides. This is where the tide comes in and goes out twice every day. And the whole region of Bengal, West Bengal and Bangladesh, it breathes with these tides. The rhythm of life flows with these tides. Everything is Jowar and Bhata. And whatever happens along with this ebb and flow. And it's a beautiful region, but a place that is, again, as things which are fragile, as things that are beautiful are fragile, it's also seeing a whole lot of change. There are dirty coal plants coming up in the Sundarbans. There's a lot of dirty shipping traffic, which carries fly ash, which carries pesticides, fertilizers, oil. And of course, it's not hard to imagine that there will be mishaps. There have been mishaps. And in 2014, December, there was a massive oil spill in this highly biodiverse site, which is home to tigers and saltwater crocodiles and the masked finfoot, which is a very rare bird. And there's this crazy need for energy on one hand, and then there's also this very, very eco-sensitive region through which everything has to pass because it's a waterway. And what ended up happening with that oil spill is that the government left it to the local fishermen to clean up, and the kids and everybody were cleaning up the oil spill with their bare hands. They had no gloves, no shoes, nothing. And it was a terrible scene, but it was not the first mishap. It's not going to be the last. And that's the tragedy of it all. And one of the most important places on earth, it remains threatened. And you'll see that, unfortunately, as I've been talking, every single point I've been saying that, things are changing, it's being threatened. And that is the tragedy of the rivers of South Asia now, because the Ganga, Brahmaputra, and the Meghna basin, this basin is the most heavily populated basin in the world, home to about 800 million people. And the fate of those millions is dependent upon what we do to those rivers. Can you just imagine that, right? All those people, all those livelihoods, everything. And that's just the people. Then it's an incredibly biodiverse region. So there's all this biodiversity also, which depends upon this water, upon these rivers, the silt, and everything that the river means. And it all depends upon what we do to that river. And so that's the power of the river to take and to give. And it's something that makes you wonder then, how does one tell such stories? How does one tell the story of a basin like this with 800 million people, with 3 huge rivers and 100 tributaries, with 3 countries sharing this river, and so many different cultures, so many different religions? How does one tell such stories? How does one tell the story of a landscape? And while Rilke in this quote is referring to art and artists, I think it goes for also storytelling of landscapes, that there is no measuring with time. Going and telling the story for visiting this place for 1 year, it doesn't matter, because, things change and things are continuously changing. And even 10 years are nothing, because it's the life of a land, of the land. And how are you going to tell the story of a land in 10 years, right? So it's something that you have. So how do you do it, right? So it's something where you have to keep gathering string. Every time you visit, you take, you collect a little bit of string. It might be white, it might be dark, it might be red, it might be thick, it might be thin, it might be fat, it might be long, it might be short, it might be rough, it might be smooth, but gather all that string. Gather those stories, those strings, and then you put it together, because the most important thing is not the gathering of the string. It's not these individual pieces of string, but it's in tying it together and finding those connections. Because one dam in one place has repercussions 400 kilometers upstream, 400 kilometers downstream, or even more. And it has repercussions not just to do with water and livelihood. It has repercussions on public health. It has repercussions on education, on women, on children, on migration, on crime, on all kinds of things. So, making those connections is key. And how can you do that? You have to collect all your string and sit at your loom and start weaving. And when you weave, you tell little stories, you tell large stories, you put it all together, and finally, maybe a tapestry over time begins to come to light. I'm going to stop there. I didn't want this to be just me droning on. So I'm going to stop there, and I want to take questions. I have a bunch of questions that have already come in, but Jyoti, if you want to help me, if there are any questions on the chats in online, we can maybe alternate.
Yeah, sure. So there's one question that came through from Facebook, Arati.
Yeah.
It's a message from, at least the name says San Hyderabad. And he says, beyond grammar of lighting, composition, etc., what is the thing that you look for? Is it the narrative for a sequence of pictures or individual pictures? And what moves you?
Okay. So, yeah, it's very much narrative. Everything has to do with the soul of the story, and what it is that the story needs. So the technicalities you have to master. You have to be good at that. I mean, that's just hygiene, right? Beyond that, how do you tell the story? It's like knowing words to be able to construct a sentence, but then constructing a good, strong, powerful sentence. That's the same language, that you can then use in photography. So yes, definitely, it's narrative. It's what makes you feel. And I think this was this was something a National Geographic photo editor once said, that I don't want to see something I haven't seen before, but show me something that makes me feel something, right? So it's really what touches you, what moves someone's core, what moves the viewer's core. That's important. And you can do that with multiple. Photography is a tool. Photography is a tool for storytelling. You can use words, you can use art, you can use video, you can use moving images, you can use animation, whatever it is. But there is a story in that needs to be told, and you make the best use of the tools so that the person who is viewing the story feels it. Shall we take one from Casey? So Karthik asked that with several slow violence events around, how do you choose which one to concentrate on, and how do you decide if a story can be done as a smaller project while a larger issue needs more time? And then Abhi also on Insta asked, how do you work on long-term photo documentation projects on environmental themes? And so, going back to this, right, it's how do you choose a topic? With me, and I'll only tell you what works for me, because I'm sure if you ask 3 people, you'll get 3 different takes on it, which is fine. With me, what works for me is I choose things that matter to me. And I've grown up with the rhetoric of large dams, and my father was vehemently against large dams, and my uncle was in the World Bank, and he was a proponent of large dams. And this is the early 80s. So, it was not it's not now when everybody knows that large dams don't work and it's not good, in spite of India continuing with it. A lot of the West is not. So, this rhetoric was always there at home, and I grew up with it. And so when the time came for me to choose what I wanted to do, I looked at the map of Arunachal Pradesh, and I saw that India had planned upwards of 100 dams. I think at the time it was 160, and I think it came down to 140 or something like that, but dams on the tributaries of the Brahmaputra. Just give that a thought. This is the Eastern Himalayas, a highly seismic region, where in 1950 we had one of the worst earthquakes ever, and we are planning large dams in this region, right? So I wanted to see for myself, what it is and what happens when you would need, what is there right now and what will change when you build dams and so on. And so in 2014, I started going to this place. And Karthik, to answer your question, I went there I just wanted to understand what's going on, right? I had no hypothesis. I went with no preconceived notions. I just went there, and I actually had to sit in a hotel room for 6 days before one person answered my call. And then the ball starts rolling. When one person answers the call, he says, "Hey, you got to talk to this person," and then it slowly connects up, and then you start, you can start building your story. So, it started with that one visit in 2014 April, and I went back every month of that year. And it just, it's like a snowball effect, right? You just keep going and you keep finding different things, and one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, and you collect string, you gather string. And so that's how you do it. And your second question about how you decide, to do a smaller story, there are many such things, right? There is a large tapestry, and there'll be small parts that will be becoming clear. And it's very good to start doing those little things and fleshing it out, because then you'll start seeing how things fit in. But sometimes it's not that way at all. Like when I went to Rajasthan, I realized on my very first trip that I cannot write anything for a whole year. Why? Because I had to see a whole cycle. I had to see all the seasons to be able to tell what really happens in Rajasthan and how they harvest rainwater. So it depends, it depends on the situation. Sometimes it's right. You'll know when the story is ready to be done, or you'll know when you need to wait a little longer. Is there any other question, Jyoti, that you want to push in? Otherwise, I'll go to the next one here.
Not from my end, Arati, not at the moment.
Okay, great. So Enough Man asks, what made you want to become a photographer? I think I would change that to what made you want to become a storyteller. I always wanted to be a storyteller, never only a photographer. Writing was always very much a part of me. Though, of course, my editor who is online will smile because I do precious little of it these days. These two things, I think I was in my teens and early 20s when these came out. These two National Geographic stories. One was Ndoki with this, the picture of a blurred elephant with I think it was a flash, in his eye. And I was just wondering, what, the energy of it just moved me, and the story and the photographs within. And Mega Transect is about Mike Fay walking across the Congo. And for me, walking across landscapes has always been a dream, to go slowly at the human pace of life, walk through landscapes. And I was really lucky to be able to accompany Paul Salopek on his walk across India, and we walked 600 kilometers together. And it was like a dream come true, because, walking through landscapes makes you aware of the place in a completely different way. You feel it with all five senses. It's so different from when you drive into a place, when you walk into a place, when you walk into even a village, or you walk into a city, you can feel the difference. You can feel the transition from the rural to the urban. And that's, it's just a beautiful feeling. And I think that's what made me, when I read Mega Transect all those years ago, I've always felt like I wanted to do that. And so I think that was what made me want to become a storyteller. But it took me a long time to actually come to it. I wandered quite a bit. Chetan Krishna on Twitter asks, while working on a subject, what are the top 5 temptations or pitfalls that a photographer should watch out for? And again, I think this would be a photographer replaced by storyteller, and it would work just as well. In fact, work dandily. Number 1 is presupposing a story. And it's wonderful, you do a lot of research as a storyteller. You do a lot of research before you go into field. But then when you reach the place, you find that it's not as you have read. Sometimes it's not, the people who are living that life don't feel the way that it has been portrayed in the media, maybe, or in research papers. Or you find something slightly different, or you find that the story is not in that place at all, it's in some other place, right? So going without preconceived notions is really important. So don't presuppose a story. I go pretty much, while I do my homework and I do a lot of research, when I step into field, I allow myself to only listen, which brings me to my second point. In field, the temptation to talk and tell people what you think is a pitfall. And I try really hard not to do that. And I like to listen, because what you hear can really surprise you. And this is not, I want to caution, if you fly into a place and fly out, or if you parachute into a place and parachute out, you're going to hear sound bites. You're going to hear people tell you things that they think you want to hear. But if you spend time in a landscape and you just kind of live with the rhythm of the place, that's when you start listening to things which go deeper. And that's really important in stories of slow violence, because what comes out, at first glance is not, you'll find very often is not the real crux of the matter. You need to spend time, and you need to keep listening for it to start deepening the story. The third is hurrying through a meeting. That's another pitfall. A lot of us are in the fast. I come from I worked 10 years in corporate, and the 5 key takeaways, or, give me the punch, like the last, what is the key takeaway? That's so important for all of us, but it doesn't work like that when it comes to storytelling. And endless cups of tea, you cannot refuse. So make sure you go on an empty stomach. You just keep drink and just be. I have sat through meetings where people have spoken in languages I can't even understand, and for hours, and I haven't said anything, because I want to make them realize that I'm here for the long haul, and I'm not somebody to jaldi batao, like tell me quickly and I need to leave. That it's not that. So hurrying through a meeting is a huge pitfall. You don't want to do that. The fourth is almost probably the most important. it's framing. And it comes back to something that Alison Morley of the of ICP in New York told me in 2012, and it stayed with me. And she said, what you put inside the frame, what you leave outside the frame is almost as important as what you put in it. So if you think of, when you raise your camera to shoot, it's very easy to shoot what you want to portray, and kind of try to leave out the things that are either messy or don't fall in with the story, or are contradictory to the story. And that's really important. You need to be intellectually honest. And if there's something that's not quite gelling with what you came with, or what you thought was the story, you have to allow for that reality to come through. And not so. For example, if you're shooting wildlife or something, you're shooting wildlife, and there's like messy, urbanness going on, or some technology stuff happening in the background, and you want to take that off, and you want to show pristine wildlife. That doesn't quite work, because the world is what it is, and it is messy, and things are messy, and it's hard, and you need to be able to find a way to do that framing, which is aesthetic, but also very or as close to what is, without trying to kind of work around it. And the fifth is imposing an outcome. When we come back to desk, it's very tempting to write a conclusion. You tell your whole story, and then you twist the end to fall in line with what you're comfortable with. And it's very tempting to do that, and it takes a lot of courage to say, okay, hey, maybe I was wrong, or maybe that's not what these people want. And if it's the life of people who are living in a landscape, listening to them and what they want, or what they have said they want, and what is reality there, it's important to portray that. And so imposing your own outcome on that is another thing that I think would not be so great. Jyoti?
Yes.
Anything else?
Yes, lots more actually.
Good. I'm tired of talking.
So I am sure we're going to keep you engaged for a little bit more. We want a little bit more of Arati. So I have a question right here in the webinar. Chetan asks, what is the outcome you're looking for in these projects? The narrative, or compelling photographs, or unearthing a story? How do you give it closure when you know that there is so much more to be done?
Luckily, we live in a time when you can continue telling a story. So you can have a living component to every story, either your blog or your Twitter feed or your Insta feed or something, right? So even if something does get published, and of course things do get published, you can continue the narrative. You can continue updating your readers with things. And I think it's very incumbent upon the storyteller to stay engaged with the story, especially in stories of slow violence, because things keep going on, right? So you want to be able to stay engaged. So that's important. And what's important to me in terms of an outcome, it would be very lofty to say I want to change the world, but I've kind of given that up. That ain't happening. So I think it's more, it's chronicling what's happening, staying witness, keeping an eye on things, and making sure I'm documenting changes. So in terms of visuals, it's very clear in some places, of how things were last year, how things are this year, how things are in certain seasons and so on. So to be able to keep that, it's like a record, right? You're just basically chronicling it. You're keeping a record of the changes in the landscape. So that's, I think that record keeping is very important to me.
Thank you. Thanks for answering that. We have someone on YouTube, Vijay Raghavan. He's an artist. I know him myself. He asks, Arati, do you have any political views in your series of killing the hero Sundarbans?
Political views. Oh God, I wrote that a while ago. I think my only politics is the land. I know it's going to sound super cheesy, but I really would love to do right by the land in what I write. So I try to listen to maybe what the land is telling. And I listen very closely to certain hydrologists and certain researchers that I have a lot of respect for, like Nachiket Kelkar, like Jagdish Krishnaswamy, people like that who I think, inform. They're almost like conscience keepers of things. They don't mince words. If things are not all hunky-dory, they say so. If things are not as bad as people are making them out to be, they say so. So I like to keep them as like my my lodestar. So yeah, I'm sure anybody who's a storyteller, your politics will come out in your words and your framing of sentences. So I'm sure my politics come out there. But I try to, I think, do right by, what should be, what is right for the Sundarbans in this case, in the case of killing the hero.
Right. Thanks for that. Thank you for sharing that. Santosh on Facebook, this is his second question. There are two more, Arati, but you can probably take it later from him. This one I will ask for Santosh. He asks, Arati, how do you balance personal life with professional life? Please share us the difficulties that you have to go through to do the balancing.
Ouch. That's a tough one. And I have a few friends on, I think, at least they told me they'd be on, so they're probably also chuckling at this. I have a daughter, I have a family, I have 3 cats, and it's really hard to juggle family life with, constantly being on the road. So yes, it's hard, but some of those things, I'm really glad that I have such a supportive family. They understand that I need to do this. And not for any other lofty reason, just for myself, so that I'm not crabby with them, maybe. So I think they have been very, very good with, kind of holding fort when I'm gone, both my husband and my daughter. And then, so we take turns. My husband travels a lot too. So we take turns traveling as long as my daughter was home. Now she's off to college too. So now we're all doing our own little thing. So it's a hard thing. It's hard juggling it, yes. But, like somebody says, if it's a priority, you find a way.
Yeah, we'll hold on to that thought for a while. If it's a priority, you'll find your way. One more question, Arati. It is, what kind of advice or pointers do you have for Indian photographers who are applying for the National Geographic grant?
I have gotten this in the last week about 6 times from different people. So I think it would be a very good, it's very hard to do that in a small call like this, but I'll just give you 4 or 5 things that I'm telling, top of mind things, right? One is when you write for a grant, write about something that you do know, okay? About a place that you have been to, people that you know, that you have access to. It's very, very important. Don't write about something that you want to do completely new, where you have to go and build access and you don't really have access to the community or the place. So that's really important. And secondly, keep it relevant, keep it why now? Answer the question why now, which is really important. What's urgent about it that you think it needs to be done now? That's really key. The third is the National Geographic grant is keen on seeing how you would want to distribute the work, and so if you could have a good, strong distribution plan, that's great. And fourthly, don't inflate the budgets. Keep it. Make sure that you think of everything, because budgets are very hairy, and you kind of miss things which are crucial. So think through everything. Be very, very clear about it, but don't pad it too much, because that's not ethical. So I think those are 4 things that are key. Oh, one thing, when you're wording it, make sure that what might be very like common knowledge to India and Indians in terms of geography, you spell it out, because not everybody is familiar with the geography of the subcontinent and terminology that we use. Even the Western Ghats, for example, right? What is the Western Ghats? So just be a little more explicit when you do the context setting and the place setting. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that was quite a, very detailed answer. I think it was fantastic that you take the time to answer so well. I have one more for you, Aarti. Harsha Pandav asks on Facebook, thanks for the talk, Aarti. I'm interested in understanding the funding side of things. How were you financing the many trips crucial for production of a larger cohesive tapestry before you were able to secure project specific funding? Can you also detail out your experience materializing your first major grant that really pushed you and your production capacities?
Funding is always a tough one, yeah. Grant writing is the only way that you can do, kind of good work without having to, fleece the prince to pay the pauper. That is, do something on the side and so on. So if you write for grants and you get grants, but getting grants is really hairy. That's so. How did I fund my first year of going to the desert every month to do research and to listen? Was funded out of pocket, and it was really heavy. I mean, so I came from corporate work and I had some, savings which was wiped out with, buying equipment as well as travel, and then I had to borrow. But yeah, so it's hard. It's not an easy thing, and that's really not an easy answer. That's probably the hardest part of what I do because of the nature of the work, which is slow. And in terms of what was my first grant, I think my first grant which I got, which I'm immensely thankful to, is the Asia Foundation grant, which allowed me to do work around Faraka, because it allowed me to understand in depth what is happening along the river, the Ganga, and that was huge. So I think I'm immensely thankful to Asia Foundation for that first grant, and that was the one that got me going. But before that, before the Asia Foundation grant, was Yahoo, which commissioned me to do the River Diaries. Prem Panikar was the editor of Yahoo at that time, and he took a chance, and I will be forever indebted to him. And that would be the single largest gamble I think anybody has ever taken on me. And those 6 months of the River Diaries, starting in April, 8 months, and ending with the oil spill in at the Sundarbans, allowed me to do a whole lot of work. So yeah, you need, angels like Prem to make such things happen. And there are precious few editors in India who see the need for long-term, sustained, long-form storytelling. So good luck.
Thanks, Arati. How are we doing time-wise? Are you open to some more questions? Or
yes, actually, yeah, I'll just run through a few of these questions too.
Yes, yeah? I think you should do that.
So yes. Arvind on Insta said, scientists must learn how to use photography to, it's more of a comment. I think, it works both ways. Yes, of course. I think, communication and the humanities is really important to stress for young kids and, young scientists to be able to tell their stories in a way that's palatable to the layman. So yes, but also the other way where, photographers have to do their hardcore research. They should also have the intellectual honesty to look through. Not everything is climate change. I see so many photographs of things which are billed as climate change, which are so patently not climate change, and it makes me cringe. And so, it's incumbent upon us as photographers too to do our research. So I think that kind of the best thing I could say is collaborate with the scientists so that you can translate the work, but understand it well as well. And I think collaborations are huge, and it would be really good to collaborate more with more people and kind of build a community of storytellers with different strengths, and you do it that way. Just going to go through another one. Dewdrops and Rainbows on Insta says, how we fail to see that we have diverse, amazing biodiversity and cultural landscapes, and that's grossly underrepresented. Yes. And you bring up like a pet peeve of mine. There's something called the Wasteland Atlas of India, where India comes up with this these things called wastelands, and the large part of the Thar Desert is called wasteland, which means this is called wasteland. What they don't understand is that under those dunes is water. These dunes hold water. So Chatar Singh Ji here is digging up a dune and he comes up with moist sand. There's water in the belly of the dunes. And this is precious. It's not wasteland. It's not something to be mined and taken away. This is what sustains many endangered species and the pastoralists who move through this land. It's really important to remember that. Also, the Jaisalmer district has this thing of orans, which are sacred groves, and there are amazingly old sacred groves in Jaisalmer district. To call this a wasteland is I think just a tragedy. And so deserts, grasslands, wetlands, swamps, bogs, even in our language, right? Drain the swamp and things like that. The way we talk about certain landscapes gives it a bad rap. And I think that leads to then desecration of these landscapes. So I think that's something that we do need to change and, kind of remember and recognize that there are indigenous people who use these places and use it well and depend upon it and revere it. And we have to respect that. Okay, Aprajita on Insta says, how do you approach subjects without coming across as a trick, making them feel self-conscious? Again, this comes down to time. You have to spend time with your, in field. And one thing so the bottom right picture where the man is pointing, I sat with these people over chai and they were doing opium, and they were chatting about the price of goats and sheep and camel and things like that. And you get an insight into what life is really like outside of your lens on that landscape, right? So it's a beautiful way to break ice with them. So just sit and listen to them. But remember, and this is something that I really feel, that oftentimes it's the man who talks. And very often in my stories, I find that it's the male voice that is talking. So I have to make an extra effort to go and sit with the women. But it makes a huge difference. They welcome you, they adopt you, and you become family to them. And then you start seeing a side which does not come out normally, because very few people take the trouble to try and see the other point of view. And on the bottom left is this story from Sundarbans, where I spent a lot of time with this lovely lady called Kavita, who lost her husband and her father to the tiger. And again, you spend time with them, you have to be there and just realize, make them, not throw it in their faces, but really, sincerely, if you show it sincerely that you're there genuinely for listening to them, genuinely listening to them, they start opening up. But all of that comes with time. If you go with an agenda of in 3 hours, I need to be out of here because I have to catch a plane, it's not going to happen. And so, I go with one-way tickets, and that's the only way, because you don't know how long some of these things will take. How do you approach local people you work on with long-term? You have to approach local people to work on long-term projects. And how you do it again is, this is Chatar Singh Ji, who is a shepherd and a farmer in the desert. And I went to Rajasthan I went to Ramgarh for the first time with his phone number. And I called him, and then he came, picked me up from the bus stop, and we were sitting and chatting over chai. And he said, how much? And I asked him something, and he said, how much time do you have? And luckily I did go with a one-way ticket. So I told him I haven't booked my ticket back. And he said, that's the best way. And then he just opened up, and he has been my collaborator. He even called me just last week, in fact, to check up. We do this, we check in on each other once in a while to, find out how the rains have been and, what has been happening and so on. And the first time I met him was 2013. So you see, it's been 8 years and we've been in touch. So these become these extended family, and it's a lovely feeling. It's an absolutely lovely feeling. And I'm sure, Prem, who's on this call also will concur, because, people from the walk with Paul, people who we met, are still calling us today and asking us, just calling to ask how we are. They don't want anything. They're just calling to find out how you are. And that becomes a very beautiful relationship. And you kind of, it's much more meaningful then. Arvind on Insta asks, should every photograph have a conservation value and art takes a big hit if so? Well, I take exception to the fact that art takes a big hit if so. And the reason why I say that is because of the next slide, where I'll show you a bunch of photographs taken by different people, which is so beautiful and full of conservation value. Should every photograph have a conservation value? The question is what your intent is, right? If it's raising awareness, which a lot of photographers claim to want to do, then the question is raising awareness about what? Does taking yet another photo of a tiger from a jeep raise awareness? If so, about what? Or do we live in a time where we need to deepen some of these stories, right? Do we need to live in a time when you need to talk about things more than I saw this T23 or 6, whatever, tiger and so on, or a leopard or whatever, right? So the question is your intent, and what is your intent? And I think that's really important. And I must say that I must call out here, very recently I saw a beautiful documentary made by Akanksha Sood Singh and team on Aparajita Datta's work in Pake with the Nishi tribals on protecting hornbills. It's in On the Brink. And I thought that was beautifully done because it talked about issues, it talked about natural history, it talked about conservation, and it did it so beautifully that you stayed riveted. And so I think there is a way. You can find a way. Again, it comes back to, if it's a priority, you will find a way to make it aesthetic, make it compelling, more than aesthetic, compelling. Okay, one more question. How did you join Nat Geo? I haven't joined Nat Geo, but walking with Paul, I think over summer, in the heat of summer through Rajasthan, it did something to both our heads, and he pushed me to write for a grant. I wrote a grant and then got it. And now, yes, so I'm an explorer, as well as I do write for them for both their print magazine and their online. So yeah, I write for them, and I'm an explorer, so I'm on their grant, but I haven't joined Nat Geo. Your views on the West's ordeal with India's carbon footprint. One of my favorite topics. It's encompassed in this one, graph of historical emitters. And when I went to the COP summit in Paris in 2015, I swore never to go again, because it's just a mela of people who want to keep the status quo. So yeah, this is what it is, and I don't subscribe to the whole West's rhetoric, because there's a lot that they have to account for. I'm going to stop here and ask if there's anything else online.
Just one or two, Arati. Actually, one is from Hetal Trivedi, and he asks, if you think it is appropriate, can you elaborate on the Adopt a Hornbill Nest program?
Oh, is it appropriate? I don't know. I'll have to ask you. Can I do it?
Well, we are an open platform, so yes, please go ahead.
Great. Well, it goes back to what I just spoke about. Aparajita Datta's team working in Pake in the forest outside Pake to protect three species of hornbills. And what happens is that if you donate to their program, you adopt a nest or two or whatever, depending upon how much you donate. And that then qualifies you to be a hornbill parent. Basically, what you're doing is you're paying for the nest protectors from the Nishi tribe, who watch these big trees in which these hornbills nest. And the hornbills do a very interesting thing. The female hornbill goes inside this cavity in a huge tree, old tree, which therefore, the loggers have their eyes on, which is why it's threatened also. The female hornbill goes inside and then shuts up the cavity, and she stays inside through laying the egg and the chick coming out and growing and all of that. And the male hornbill feeds her. So there's, it's a very vulnerable time for the hornbills. And so these nest protectors, the Nishi tribal nest protectors, they watch these nests through the process, and make sure that there's that the chicks have the maximum chance of fledging. So I'm just helping them out by doing a print sale, where if you buy a print, you can you become a hornbill parent, because all of the profits will go to them. I don't make any money out of it, and you can also, of course, donate directly to the hornbill program. Thank you for asking that.
That's such a sweet thing. I'm glad that I let you answer that, and I hope some people here will be converted into hornbill parents. Sorry.
Nothing. I just said I hope so.
Okay. The next question is from Harshit Chawla on Facebook, and he says, "Do people affected by these issues have hopes or expectations of receiving help when you are photographing them? How do you deal with the case when victims might not directly receive immediate help?"
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's very, I'm constantly asked when I go there with my camera that, is this going to be on TV? Are you going to make a difference? Are you going to talk to the Prime Minister? Is this going to, change our things? And the way I approach that is I tell them very, very clearly what is and what is not, what I do and what I can do and what I cannot do. And so I don't leave them with any false hopes, So that's the best I can do. Sometimes if it is something where I'm collecting string and that it's not even going to be published, I tell them that too. And, it's completely understandable if then they don't want to talk to me, that's fine. So, I make sure that everything is clear and, above board. Nothing is hidden, no agenda. So yeah, it's very important. And some of them are very angry with, either the local government or the central government or whatever, right? They're very angry because they are in very dire need. So, or some of them are just very sad. And some of them are very happy in spite of being, completely devastated. It's the way they are really it makes me feel like I have nothing to complain about ever. And it depends. So sometimes I do get pushback and I say, there's no use of people like you coming and talking to us, that kind of thing. And I understand where they're coming from. But then when you stick around and you're there for days after days after days and weeks, they kind of realize that you're here for, you genuinely want to understand what's going on. And I've seen people then, come up to me and talk and take me to places, show me things. And so they come around. But again, it takes time, and honesty is just the best gift you can give them. Complete honesty. So no stringing them along for anything.
Great. I think that was yeah. I mean, basically, that's what it is, right? Honesty. You've got to be honest in your endeavors. Santosh asks another interesting question. He says, "Can you talk about the dual elephant pic that's on your website? It's a masterpiece. How did you click it?"
Which one is it?
He says the dual elephant pic.
Is it I wonder if it's the photograph with both of them with their trunks together. So this again comes down to spending a lot of time in field. Most of my elephant pictures are from Sri Lanka, and in 2012, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, I went repeatedly during the dry season to Sri Lanka, and I spent a lot of time on the grasslands, the tank sides, which the receding tank then becomes grassy, and the elephants come there to feed. It's the largest gathering of wild African elephants, wild Asian elephants, sorry, in Asia, in Sri Lanka. And so I spend a lot of time, and when you're again, the elephants have to get used to you. So I go with a very experienced driver, who not somebody who will rev the car and stop it and get afraid and kind of back off if, elephants come close and so on. Somebody who's very calm and who understands behavior, who has worked with elephant researchers, a very good elephant researcher friend of mine, Manori. So, I kind of do everything that she says when I'm in Sri Lanka. It's, she knows the best. So I go with him, and, we allow the elephants to get used to us, which means that we go around 1 o'clock, and then until 6 o'clock, we're just in one place mostly. and the herds are around us. So we get to see a lot of animal behavior, elephant behavior, which is beautiful. So then you have these gems come up, it's and you go day after day after day and hours, can you imagine? So you click a lot, but you also get to see some of these very beautiful things. And then you have precious moments like that. I've seen a very baby elephant, like really small baby, come very close to me. And it's just very sweet things happen, when the elephants kind of get used to find you not threatening, rather.
Oh, that must be such a beautiful experience, a baby elephant walking up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm done with the questions from my end, Arati.
Just a few left here, I think.
Yeah.
Just take a quick one. What challenges do you face in the field of photography, both as an individual and as a woman? I think the challenges to speak of are really outside of the field, where there's willful, ignorance on the part of people who already know what the issues are, but choose not to see it, not to do anything about it, and actually do the opposite. So I think those are challenges which are far more important to me and make me desperate. On field, in fact, I can't really say that there's, and that anything that I want to bring up and complain about. It's stuff that you learn to work through and work with. You just don't do things that put you in danger at any point. I mean, you just take the normal precautions. But other than that, I think the challenge is more outside, where, you're trying to move the needle in some way and it just refuses to budge. Chetan asks, how do you ensure the magic of technology does not overpower or overwhelm your work and aesthetic sensibilities? Where do you draw the line? Technology for me is just tools. So I use the tools any way that I think is ethical and powerful, to the best of my ability, to be able to tell the story. So I'm not slave to it. Of course, yes, I do check social media a bit too much sometimes, and I need to get away from that and concentrate on doing good work. Sometimes that happens. That's a tough, it's a constant struggle with me. Sometimes overwhelming Twitter or Instagram happens. But yeah, other than that, in terms of work, I use it only as a tool. So yeah. But a beautiful quote from Aldo Leopold came to mind when Chetan asked that question, that civilization has so cluttered this elemental man-earth relationship with gadgets and middlemen that awareness of it is growing dim. We fancy that industry supports us, forgetting what supports industry. And this was written by Aldo Leopold in 1949. And it is something that I have up on my desk. And, it's something that I just completely agree with. That we fancy industry supports us, forgetting what supports industry. And, we keep thinking about, economics, but in the economy, but what is the bedrock of economy? It's nothing but the land. It's nothing but how we treat our rivers and our land and our, everything. So that's something that we need to bear in mind. And, technology comes after all that. I'm just going to do one quick shout out before we end here, because I'm sure we're actually past time. For people starting out, I cannot stress the importance of mentors. I have been super, 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 super lucky since 2012. When I met Prem Panikar, 2013, I met Pradeep Krishnan and Paul Salopek came in 2014. And these three people, the three Ps in my life, my professional life, they have been invaluable in kind of helping me navigate through storytelling in different ways. And each one brings a completely different set of, gifts for me. And I cannot stress the importance of mentors for anybody starting up. And I wish everybody finds a mentor. And here I want to call out the Indian Photo Festival, which has just launched its mentorship program with some amazing mentors. And I just looked at the cohort and I was just thinking, man, please take advantage, please apply, make sure that your application is strong. And I hope you get these guys as mentors, because mentors are invaluable, absolutely invaluable. if there's nothing else, and if there are no other questions, I just want to leave you with this. It's something that Prem introduced me to, and it's also something, again, that is up on my desk. It is the essence of storytelling. And whether it's long form or even if it's just one line that you write, this is the essence of storytelling. If it's one photograph that you shoot, I guess I must say, because we're in the Indian Photo Festival. But this is what it is. And I'm going to leave it for you here on the screen for you to read. And if anybody wants to hit me up later, it's the DC Comics guide of how to tell a story. And it says everything that needs to be said. Thank you, everyone, for staying through and listening to me rambling. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks for the interest. And I hope to see you all in person sometime soon. Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you, Indian Photo Festival. And I hope that's that.
Thank you, Arati. Can't thank you enough for how patiently you've taken on every question that we brought to you. It was a pleasure to have you with us. And yes, we do look forward to seeing you in person. Maybe next year, maybe some other time, but let's keep in touch.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.